welcome to the final session of BGI 24. Not the end of the event. We've got a barbecue by the pool after this, and then some of us will be around after that the rest of the day, informally discussing various things. But this will be the last session in this room up on stage, and anyway, so yeah, we'll do another one next year. So yeah, I'm first of all, I want to say I'm grateful to all of you who have taken time out of your life to come down here to Panama City and participate in the event. I mean, as well as to everyone who's participating online, listening to this live stream and engaging in the online discussions. I mean, life is just ridiculously busy for most of us in the current order of things, and taking 4 days for a conference plus a couple of days for travel. I mean, this is time that could be used for a lot of other things. I mean, I think obviously the topic is very, very important one for all of us, or I wouldn't be taking my own time for it, or asking others to take their time for it, right? But still, it's a concrete action to devote 6 days of your life to coming to discussion, because after all, there are actions we can take besides just discussing things, right? So, yeah, I'm grateful to all the amazing people that we've pulled together here. And this session was labeled conclusions or something like that, but of course the nature of what we're doing here does not lend itself to simple, neatly packaged conclusions. But I do think interesting progress has been made in some important ways. So my main motive in convening this group of people here is just to create stronger connections between people who are knowledgeable and active in a few different related areas that logically and conceptually are really closely connected together, but given the way social and economic dynamics work, don't intersect as much as you'd think. So I mean, one of these groups is AGI researchers and developers, people actually trying to build AGI systems. And of course, there are not a lot of AGI developers out there to build malevolent AGI systems. I mean, pretty much everyone working on AGI wants to build an AGI that will be beneficial to people, although there may be different ideas about how to go about it. But I wanted to bring together AGI researchers with various other groups of people. We have people focused on governance and human organization and decentralized governance in particular, and how do you structure groups of people to effectively make decisions about really complex things. And I've been engaged for a couple of decades now with, I guess 2.5 decades, with the transhumanist community, and there's just been a lot of deep thinking in the transhumanist world about AGI, singularity, life extension, nanotechnology. What happens when machines take all the jobs? I mean, all these issues that are popping up in the media so often now, these have been churned over and over and over again and discussed from almost every possible direction in a global community of smart people over decades. I mean, I've been thinking about this since the 70s, some of the audience for even longer, but the organized transhumanist community has been thinking about it for a couple of decades also, and all that thinking won't go to waste. This has to infuse what actually unfolds over the coming years. And then there's also the consciousness research community, because while we don't have an agreed scientific understanding of what consciousness is or how it works, yet this is an incredibly critical part of what we're doing with AGI, right? I mean, we're building machines that in some form are aware of the world and that may well have whatever kind of consciousness people have, maybe even more. We're also affecting human consciousness in all sorts of ways, even before we get to something like a singularity, and quite radically so afterwards. So having people who have been deeply engaged with understanding human consciousness from various perspectives, scientific and experiential, personal and transpersonal, seemed important that the consciousness community becomes connected with all these other different communities of people. And I think we've successfully mixed up, brilliant, open-minded, creative, curious people interested in and engaged in doing real things in the world. I mean, we've pulled together people like this from all these different communities I mentioned, and a whole bunch more. I mean, we have neuroscientists, we have entrepreneurs, we have a great complex systems theorists, we have a great diversity of people from different schools of thinking and walks of life. And I think getting this sort of breadth of thought and experience together to focus on the question of how to best work toward beneficial general intelligence. I think this is a quite important thing to do. I mean, of course, getting together and talking can't be the end game, but most of us here are engaged in the rest of our life with doing various concrete, impactful things in the world, right? And what I'm hoping comes out of this is that many people and organizations have made connections that they wouldn't necessarily have made otherwise, and these connections can then drive practical action in different ways than would have happened otherwise. And I mean, most of this, to be honest, will happen in an informal and unstructured way because people met each other and will decide they want to do something together. We will also make some concrete steps toward creating social media groups and networks and so forth, pulling together the people who have been at the event face-to-face and online, so there can be some explicit BGI community going forward after the event in which the conversations that have occurred at the event can then continue. I want to briefly reiterate for a minute or two a couple of the themes I touched on in my opening remarks, because I think we may look at these things slightly differently given the discussions we've had during the last 4 days. So no one has created human-level artificial general intelligence yet. None of us has a solid knowledge of when we're going to get there. I mean, there's known unknowns and probably unknown unknowns. On the other hand, to me, it seems quite plausible we could get to human-level AGI within, let's say, the next 3 to 8 years. And there's at least 3 lines of converging evidence in my mind when I say that. I mean, one is the great Ray Kurzweil's experiments in curve fitting, and others before Ray have done similar exercises, and I should nod to Amara Angelica, who helped Ray with a lot of this work. Well, I mean, what he showed in his book, The Singularity is Near, and a bunch of subsequent work in his forthcoming book, The Singularity is Nearer, I mean, what he showed is that a great number of measures of technological progress are roughly following exponential curves whose slope will tend toward infinity around in the next decade or two, right? And so he was looking at, seems likely an individual computer will have roughly the compute power of a human brain by 2029, 2030. Then you add another 10, 15 years on that, an individual computer would have roughly the compute power of all of human society. And, you know, this is a very crude way of looking at it. I mean, the AIs that we're working with now are not running on individual computers anyway. They're running on big networks. And then, of course, what is an individual computer? We're moving to quantum computing and so forth. But if you dig in depth into all the different measures of progress Ray has tabulated, it's a quite compelling case that we're in an era of exponential change. Our minds are more habituated to linear change, so it's a little hard to wrap your brain around exponential things conceptually at first, but it's a pretty solid argument that, you know, we could be at human level AGI by 2029, 2030. And as I said in the initial remarks, my own view is once you get to human level AGI, within a few years you could be at radically superhuman AGI, unless the AGI itself decides to throttle its own development out of its own conservatism. Because I think once an AGI can introspect its own mind, then, you know, it can do engineering and science at a human or superhuman level. It should be able to make a smarter AGI than an even smarter AGI, and what I.J. Good called an intelligence explosion, right? So that may lead to an increase in the exponential rate beyond even what Ray thought. Now, another line of reasoning that makes me think AGI may be coming soon is just LLMs. I mean, the same thing that has woken up so much of the world to the potential of AI. I don't think that LLMs in themselves are a viable path toward AGI. Like, I don't think you can add a few plugins onto GPT-5 and get human level AGI. I think the way they represent knowledge doesn't represent genuine understanding or world modeling. And so I think there's fundamental limitations there. On the other hand, still, the fact that we have systems doing as much as LLMs do now, this tells you something, right? I mean, it tells you something about where the AI field in general is at. Like, we're doing a whole bunch of amazing things that a couple of years ago people thought would not be feasible to do for many decades or maybe ever, right? So even though LLMs in themselves are not the golden path to AGI, they're certainly closely related to things that are on the path to AGI, and everything they can do, you got to take that as evidence that we're probably not so far off. The third ingredient in my mind that makes me think we may be fairly close to getting human level AGI is what I see in my own work in the OpenCog HyperArm project, and then the other associated software systems we're building in SingularityNET ecosystem, which is SingularityNET platform, Hypercycle, NuNet, and so forth. So when I look at what I think we can do with the OpenCog project, I mean, it seems like some small integer number of years we might be able to get there. I mean, we have a new AGI programming language, Meta, METTA, Meta Type Talk. We have an infrastructure for atom space, a knowledge metagraph that can span across many different machines and constantly do processing across these machines. We're launching the alpha version of the Meta language interpreter in April. This is still not remotely as scalable as it needs to be to build AGI. I mean, programs still run much too slowly for what we need to make a real thinking machine. On the other hand, we have a number of different lines of development aimed at massively speeding up and scaling up the Meta interpreter, and at massively improving and scaling up our ways of distributing atom spaces, knowledge graphs across many different machines on centralized and decentralized networks of machines. it seems that by, let's say, this time next year, to be a little bit conservative, we should have a quite speedy and scalable version of OpenCog Hyperon. A year is a long time. Maybe it will be much less than a year. On the other hand, in terms of the path to the singularity and the history of the human race, a year is a very short time, right? So, I mean, if within 6, 9, 12, 15 months from now, we have a massively scalable version of OpenCog Hyperon, we can then use that to do for multiple other AI paradigms what has been done for deep neural nets. I mean, deep neural nets have been around in practice since late 60s, early 70s. I mean, in concept since the 40s and 50s. And they only recently started doing amazing things because we put so many GPUs and so much data behind them. But the AI field has a lot in it besides deep neural nets. So you've got logic systems, you've got evolutionary learning algorithms, you've got sparse distributed memories. There's a great amount of other AI algorithms and paradigms that have been thought through in great detail by brilliant researchers over many decades. What we're aiming at with the OpenCog Hyperon framework, among other things, is to make a platform that lets these things scale up tremendously. So you can take a logic engine doing common sense reasoning. You can take an evolutionary learning algorithm, learning programs that help an agent do things in the real world or a simulated world. And you can scale these up massively in a way that runs well across many processors and across many different machines. So if we can scale up these other sorts of AI algorithms in the same way that GPUs and associated software libraries have allowed scaling up of deep neural networks, I mean, then you've got something quite interesting in terms of progress toward AGI. And I spent a bunch of my career articulating a cognitive architecture which can combine AI algorithms from different paradigms together to hopefully achieve something like human-level intelligence. And this was described in my 2-book series, Engineering General Intelligence, from 2014. I had a paper more recently called The General Theory of General Intelligence, which is posted on ArcSci that goes through some of this. There's another paper I linked to in my introductory talk on OpenCog Hyperon. So if it was just optimism about my own project, I would doubt my intuition a little more because everyone's going to overestimate their own work. I mean, you sort of have to drive yourself forward. But looking at Ray Kurzweil and others and their high-level prognostication of just the rate of advance of supporting technologies, and then looking at what other AI approaches like LLMs are doing right now, and looking at the super exciting prospects for my own team's AI work, all of these are pointing in very similar direction, which is it could be 3, 5, 8, 10 years to human level AGI. It's probably not 20, 30, 50, or 80 years or something. Now, could be wrong. It could be you need like a quantum computer with 1 million qubits or something, right? But I see no scientific reason to believe that right now. Like the evidence doesn't seem to point in that direction. And so, if this is accurate, and I think even reasonably skeptical people will now admit this has a decent chance of being accurate, right? So if this even has a decent chance of being accurate now, I mean, this means that figuring out how to make this AGI beneficial in some meaningful sense is a fairly urgent problem, right? I mean, it's not as urgent as it could be. It's not like we've created the human level AGI and we really want to push the trigger, but we just want to double check if its ethics module works, right? So we're not at that point yet, but what if we're at that point 5 years from now, right? So then we would like to have thought things through rather thoroughly before we get to that point, right? And who's going to do that thinking through, right? So is that the board of OpenAI? Well, I certainly hope not, based on recent information well distributed in news media, right? So is it the Chinese government? Well, probably better off if it's not them. I mean, they've done a lot of great things and uplifted a huge amount of people from poverty, but they've got a very particular mindset, right? So it seems like if this is the decision that humanity is going to face and that some particular AGI development team is going to face, we want to accelerate the richness of our understanding of the beneficial AGI problem. And I don't think we're going to come up with any guaranteed solution to beneficial AGI. I mean, on a formal level, that seems mathematically not feasible. Just on a human and conceptual level, it seems kind of ridiculous given the chaos of human society and the fact that we don't understand physics and all sorts of other uncertainties that abound. But I don't think the lack of a guarantee means that we can't strongly bias the odds in favor of beneficial outcomes. Essentially everything ever done in human history has been done without a guarantee, including human prehistory. Like, proto-humans had no guarantee that developing tools in agriculture would not lead to an apocalypse either. So we've got to be comfortable with moving forward without a guarantee and biasing the odds in favor of beneficial outcomes anyway. And I think that radical deceleration is just not going to happen, even if some people think it would be a good thing, because AI already just delivers so much value to so many people. I mean, AI, it's making money for a lot of people. It's helping countries do defense and espionage, and unfortunately offense in some cases. It's also doing huge good for people already in medicine and education all over the place. I mean, there's really no precedent for something that's so economically, humanly, and militarily valuable being slowed down and stopped. Like, it doesn't seem like what's gonna happen, even if it was the best thing to do, which I don't necessarily feel like it is, right? So it seems like we're going forward. We're not going to have a guarantee, but we can nevertheless make our best efforts to bias the odds in a favorable direction. And I think guarded optimism is by far the most rational attitude to take. Like, if you're an athlete and you're trying to win a race, you're better off to think, well, I'm going to win this race. You're not better off to think, well, I might fall down and sprain my ankle. Like, it might rain and I might slip and fall down. Well, that other guy is doing really well, right? You don't want to fill your mind with that sort of thing. It will interrupt you from executing your best possible effort to win that race. Now, it doesn't mean you want to be dumb. You're still thinking about, well, where do you run relative to the other guy who's in front of you, and what have I done in the past when I was a little bit behind, and so forth. So you're still being rational. You're still thinking, but you have a guarded, rational optimism. And I think there's a lot of evidence that this is the best attitude for individual and groups of humans to take if they want to optimize their odds of success. I mean, it happens that tends to be the way I am neurobiologically anyway, right? But I do think just in a data-driven way that's also a good way to think about things. So this is all why I pulled this event together. After the 4 days of the event, I found myself fairly satisfied with how things went down. I as always, when organizing an event, I regret that I've been so scattered, pulled all over the place, dealing with organization things and so on. And while Pam and her crew did an amazing job of organizing the conference and making everything. Big cheer for Nake, and then for, I don't want to run through the list of everyone else because I'll forget someone, but everyone else who helped make this an amazing event. But yeah, while we had an amazing team and still do for the rest of the day, still being the event organizer means I didn't get to talk to everyone that I wanted to. So there's way more people here I really wanted to catch up to than has happened or will probably happen during the barbecue. But that's the nature of it, and we'll have more events in subsequent years. So my feeling is the making of connections certainly happened, and I just overheard an incredible number of amazing, deep conversations that I wasn't able to participate in, and participated in a few as well. I'm hoping that a few minds were open to alternate perspectives than people came in with. I mean, maybe someone who was convinced we have to tightly control AI started thinking maybe open-ended intelligence is not so insane. Maybe someone who was thinking purely about open-ended pure self-organization started thinking, well, maybe some thought to risks and safeguards is important to channel the self-organization in a good way. Maybe some people who weren't thinking about governance and how you organize groups of people to guide projects started thinking, well, this is something interesting and maybe an important aspect of how the AI evolves. It's not just about the algorithms, right? So, and I could run through a list of another 100 cross-pollinations that I sort of heard happening out of the margins of my earshot as I walked around. So I think the cross-pollination I was hoping for has happened, and my hope is that this is the beginning of the process of crystallizing a way of thinking about BGI, which is different than the standard narratives out there. So there's a standard narrative emerging, like AGI is potentially super dangerous, and we've got to regulate it. We've got to figure out how to put in filters and rules to control it so it doesn't do the wrong thing. We've got to constrain it. We've got to figure out how to make sure it doesn't have free will. And that's one narrative that's out there. Another narrative that's out there is just, look, all this constraint is hopeless. Just let companies build useful AGI products, and ultimately they'll come out for the common good, just like Facebook and Google's products have already, right? And what? But I haven't used Facebook for a while. I use Google every day. I mean, I don't love everything the company does, but it's still pretty good email and search products, right? So I think there's a different way of thinking about AGI, which is centered on complex, open-ended, self-organizing systems, both on the AI and the human level, right? So it's focused on making systems that are not rigidly constrained in what they do, with them to evolve and self-organize in certain directions, and then on creating human organizations that are also complex self-organizing systems whose growth and evolution couples with the growth and evolution of these AI networks. And we don't have such simple words for talking about these things, which is one of the problems that our community needs to work on. But I think we're making some progress toward crystallizing a decentralized defensive acceleration perspective on AGI, which incorporates not just decentralized computing, but notions of open-ended intelligence and decentralized governance of human networks. And we need to go further in crystallizing this perspective at following events, but also in between face-to-face events by a whole bunch of different conversations and initiatives. And I know Esther has been working on pulling together a sort of a distributed global brain of individuals interested in helping move AGI forward. Anna Lois is working on an AGI constitution document, which has a similar sort of purpose. And there will be a bunch of other coupled initiatives aimed at pulling together people. I know there's a nonprofit Humanity Plus, which is one of the sponsors of this event, and this has been used to be called the World Transhumanist Organization. We rebranded some years ago, and I'm in Humanity Plus. It's a membership organization. Folks can join and then join the dialogue on moving toward BGI from a transhumanist view. There's another organization, Humanity 2.0, which is represented here, which is pulling together different organizations toward similar goals, but from a different background and perspective. So I think we don't need to have one organization that channels people toward BGI. We can have a decentralized network of decentralized organizations, each pulling together people and their energies toward BGI. But we do, if some of you believe that we need to craft a path toward BGI that isn't like straight on deceleration or straight on EAC, if we need a sort of middle way toward AGI, where we're accelerating, but we're doing so in a decentralized and defensive way, I think we have a lot more work to do to crystallize that perspective. And I look forward to working together with folks in this network toward that.